easier to get people to hate you than it is to get them to like you. I wouldn't exactly know about that since everyone loves me. Right, guys? Yeah. Guys. But it's the truth, and the reason why a great many professional wrestler has professed a preference for playing the villain as opposed to the hero. Because while it might be great basking in the adulation of millions, and trust me, it is, to forge that connection with the audience and get over to that extent is far easier said than done. Sometimes that has to do with what can be quite blatant miscasting, as someone who is more fit to portray a sneering, dastardly rule breaker is tasked with eliciting cheers and garnering sympathy. This can result in the miscast performer getting the wrong type of heat and can be a serious setback in a wrestler's career. Mercifully, WWE are usually quick enough to realize when it's not working and have them turn back to the dark side before it's too late. Most of the time, that is. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 most miscast WWE babyfaces ever. Join us. Number 10, The Miz in 2012. Like Ricky Steamboat and Rey Mysterio were career babyfaces, so too should The Miz have been a heel from debut until retirement. Because, and I mean it as a compliment when I say that Mr. Michael Mizanin has one of the most punchable faces in the business. Pot calling the kettle black, Pacitti, I hear you cry, but the difference is I've never once tried to be a good guy and I've stayed true to my wicked ways. The Miz, rather unfortunately, became a babyface in 2012 after a solid 6 years of playing the heel, so effectively I might add that he became an unlikely WWE champion in late 2010. Not bad for the bloke with the Red Rooster haircut that was kicked out of the SmackDown locker room once upon a time. So why did The Miz as a babyface fail so badly? Well, there were lots of reasons, chief among them his awkward pairing with Ric Flair, bland promos, and tepid crowd reactions. The biggest reason, however, was that The Miz was still The Miz. He hadn't actually changed all that much, his general arrogance shining through above any of his supposedly virtuous qualities. WWE thankfully turned him back within the year, but his second babyface run against Shane McMahon was another miscast. Or should that be miscast? Number 9, Mr. Perfect in 1992. Kurt Hennig was a, well, perfect professional wrestling heel. Though he enjoyed success as a babyface in his earlier pre-WWE days, as the cocky and he can back it up Mr. Perfect, he was a baddie that should have went all the way to the top. An obnoxious superiority matched well with his big bumping ability in the ring, which helped his opponents look as good as possible, a trait that any successful heel should have. Perfect turned babyface when WWE were running low in that department in the fall of 1992. The British Bulldog and Ultimate Warrior had both been let go, and so Perfect stepped up, taking Warrior's place at the Survivor Series, teaming with Macho Man Randy Savage to beat Ric Flair and Razor Ramon. But there just didn't seem that much for him to do, and he was used mostly to get others over. His big brush with greatness as a goodie came when he beat the Nature Boy in an awesome Loser Leaves Town match on Raw, but that was about as good as it got. Even though he had turned the cockiness down a lot, it was hard for fans to get behind somebody who had spent the previous couple of years rubbing their noses in how bloody brilliant he was. Number 8, Mr. McMahon in 1999. Everyone loves a billionaire, that's just a fact. I mean, what's not to admire about a person that makes more money in an hour than you make in an entire year? You've just got to respect a man whose monthly suit budget is 10 times what you pay on rent. Which is why Mr. McMahon, the tyrannical owner who had spent so much time berating the fans and trying to chase away their hero, made for such a great babyface. McMahon had been a de facto heel since the Montreal Screwjob thrust him from behind the announce desk right into the middle of major storylines, and he was damn good at it. Able to rile up audiences with a scathing promo and tell a story with only his magnificent facial expressions. It was great seeing the chairman and CEO try to mess with people, only to inevitably get his comeuppance. Vince being a street tough, never say die man of the people, though, Not so much, thanks. But WWE still went ahead with this charade, most notably in late 1999 when the genetic jackhammer became the WWE champion and brave hero, standing up for his daughter against the ascendant Triple H. Let's face it, as a general rule, if your surname is McMahon, you're probably better off trying to get booze. Number 7, Randy Orton in 2004. Young Randy Orton was always being groomed for greatness, but his first taste came in just a little bit too soon. With fans organically gravitating toward the legend killer following his gutsy performance against Mick Foley at Backlash 2004, WWE decided to pull the trigger earlier than anticipated and put the World Heavyweight title on him at SummerSlam just a few short months later. This should have, in theory, kicked off a months-long slow burn storyline teasing tension between Orton and Evolution leader Triple H. But why do that when you could just have the cerebral assassin boot his protege out of the group the very next night on Raw? Randy's run only faltered from there as fans were lukewarm at best to his babyface act, and when it became clear that it wasn't working, they transferred the title to the game just weeks later at the eminently forgettable Unforgiven. The problem was that Orton, like many great heels before and since, just had an inherent unlikability about him. He was young and good looking and smug and carried himself like someone who just didn't care what fans wanted and was in it for himself. Eventually, the Viper turned back and began feuding with The Undertaker, while the spot earmarked for him went to Batista with much better results. Number 6, the Honky Tonk Man in 1986. When you think of the Honky Tonk Man, as I'm sure you must do on a daily basis, your mind will doubtless flash to the phrase longest reigning intercontinental champion in WWE history. You'll think of the slimy heel who managed to escape with his title by the skin of his teeth, the overbearing Elvis wannabe who used every underhanded tactic imaginable in order to remain champ. You probably won't even remember that old Honky actually debuted in WWE as a babyface. In his very early WWE days, the rock and roller was projected to be a big babyface star in the vein of Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant, and was paired up with fan favorites like the Junkyard Dog and Hulk Hogan. Despite their endorsements and Vince McMahon going into hard sell mode on commentary, it just didn't work. The Honky Tonk Man simply wasn't a likable creation, and the man behind the gimmick, Wayne Farris, who had been playing a cocky heel before going to WWE, was clearly struggling. So, in a stroke of genius, WWE had Honky acknowledge the lack of love, and commentator Jesse the Body Ventura encouraged fans to write in and say whether or not they actually liked him. They didn't, and the revelation propelled the Honkster to turn heel, a part he was much more suited to. Thank you very much. Number 5, Triple H in 2002. A McMahon in spirit, Triple H is another who is far more effective when he's playing a rogue. The game has had some bright spells as a babyface, particularly as the foul-mouthed DX band leader in the late 90s. But when he's portrayed as not only the funniest but smartest and toughest best wrestler who ever wrestled a wrestling match, come on now, Helmsley. The most egregious example of this is when Hunter returned from his first torn quad in early 2002. Yes, we were all happy to see him, as evident by the thunderous reception he received from Madison Square Garden, but his Royal Rumble victory and march to the WrestleMania main event exposed just how ill-suited he was to be the company's premier babyface. Unsurprisingly, his big title run ended at the very next pay-per-view, thanks to the nostalgia-fueled power of Hulkamania. Following that, it wasn't too long before WWE realized that the cerebral assassin should go back to being a baddie and had him turn on Shawn Michaels, another who had been miscast in the past. Fans do like Triple H, yes, but his look, character, wrestling and promo style all lend to being an old school heel, not a conquering babyface. Number 4, Scott Steiner in 2002. The late 2002 signing of Scott Steiner gave WWE a much needed shot in the arm. Big Papa Pump was one of the true stars of latter-day WCW, and after sitting out the invasion, clever boy, Scotty promised to bring his freaks and peaks to WWE, and a storyline bidding war between the brands to secure his services commenced. Ideally, the big bad booty daddy would have come in as his hell-raising heelish best self and gone to SmackDown, where he could have had intriguing matches with the SmackDown 6 and a proper hoss showdown with Brock Lesnar or The Undertaker. Unfortunately though, Steiner went to Raw, where he was positioned as the top babyface against World Heavyweight Champion Triple H, whose maligned reign of terror was just starting to gather momentum. Steiner as a babyface was just off from the start. He got some pretty damned impressive pops from the live crowd, and he did do good work in segments and promos, but the whole thing fell apart when the bell rang. After stinking out the joint twice against the game on pay-per-view, WWE actually persisted with the Genetic Freaks face run and had him feud with the unlikable Test before recognizing that Steiner himself wasn't so warm and personable and teamed them up instead. Number 3, Batista in 2014. Batista's natural rise from feared evolution muscle man to beloved world heavyweight champion was a thing of beauty, and a rare instance of WWE reading the room right and running with what the fans wanted to see. But the animal found it hard to play the role consistently for a long period of time though, and seemed to relish being a heel much more. Some of the best work of his career came when he turned heel in late 2009 and feuded with former friend and tag partner Rey Mysterio and then John Cena. Sadly, once the program with Big Match John wrapped up, Big Dave said goodbye to WWE and went to Hollywood, where he diligently worked for 3.5 years before his early 2014 return was announced. While fans were initially receptive, WWE didn't count on Daniel Bryan catching fire and stealing the movie star's thunder, causing WWE to pivot and go in another direction after Batista won the Royal Rumble and bagged the coveted WrestleMania main event slots. In truth, the switch worked for everyone involved, especially Batista, because though he didn't reclaim the WWE title, he did get to work as a villain, something he was much more adept at and looked to be having fun doing. That was the Batista that fans remembered and looked forward to booing, the spotlight-demanding prima donna who didn't care what the people thought as long as he got paid in cash by the truckload and received top billing. Number 2, Roman Reigns. It's almost hard to remember just how doggedly WWE persisted with the make Roman Reigns the #1 babyface in the company experiment when you look at his recent exemplary heel run. But WWE were intent on crowning the big dog as the new babyface sensation, replacing a John Cena who was in the autumn of his career and had enjoyed an almost unprecedented run as the guy. The big dog initially caught the eye as the de facto leader of the Shield, who was so cool as heels that they became babyfaces. Unfortunately, the likes of former partner Dean Ambrose and Daniel Bryan were receiving stronger reactions and were clearly the type of performers that the audience wanted to see vying for the main prizes. Everything came to a head at the 2015 Royal Rumble when Reigns won the over-the-top extravaganza and was booed out of the building, with even a post-match endorsement by The Rock receiving nothing but undiluted vitriol. Things didn't get any better from there as Reigns routinely failed in his quest to become WWE champion as the voices of dissent grew louder. Happily, WWE finally sanctioned the heel turn after years of struggle, allowing Roman to build his empire and do the best work of his career. Number 1, Lex Luger in 1993. Once the World Bodybuilding Federation went up in a puff of protein powder, Lex Luger joined up with WWE with the gimmick of a self-obsessed narcissist. It was a fitting guise for Luger, a man known within the industry to care more about how chiseled his abs were than how good his match was, someone who never had really fallen in love with the business the way that many of the great ones do. When Hulk Hogan left in mid-1993, however, Vince McMahon hit the panic button and decided to use Lex as the new true red, white and blue American hero. After slamming that evil foreigner, Yokozuna, on board the USS Intrepid on the 4th of July, fans in the United States pinned all of their hopes on Luger as the total package toured the country in his custom-made Lex Express tour bus. But Luger wasn't one for shaking hands or kissing babies, and his indifference to it was all too apparent. Then he failed his WWE title pursuit twice, while Bret Hart triumphed and got the glory, taking WWE and its new generation into the next era. The character just wasn't Lex, and was a case of WWE trying to make a babyface star out of someone who was a born scoundrel. A scoundrel with blonde hair and good teeth and massive pythons, but a scoundrel all the same. Brother!